Shalom and greetings. I want to cover something that we had went over last Shabbat, and it's concerning the rendering of Psalms 81 verse 3, as you see. And during that segment, we were all gathered at Moray's Atriya's gathering, and I was giving a discourse on the topic of the new moon. And I asked for someone to read Psalms 81 and 3, and a sister read it, and it read a little differently than what we had in the King James Version. And as you can see here, I have the King James Version before us, and it reads, "Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the time appointed, on our solemn feast day." Now, when the sister read her version, I can't remember which one it was, but it mentioned instead of the time appointed, it put full moon. And then we were reading different translations of the English in different books, like the Sefer and the New King James. I can't remember all the ones. And also the New World Translation, I remember that one. And so let's look at something, and let's go into the Hebrew, because what we'll find out is in the King James Version, that is a little vague, to say the least. I've often hear individuals saying that the King James Version is the best translation from the Hebrew to the English language, and I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of any of the English translations doing a good job on the proper translation from Hebrew. So let's just get into it and go word for word as what appears in Hebrew to see where some have developed doctrines about the new moon, and see where that came from, and then visit what the Hebrew says and see if we can get unified on that topic. Because the thing that I've noticed is that oftentimes we will take a English rendered word and precept it to other words, and that word may not be the correct word. So therefore, we argue, we debate, and we take different doctrines and try to make sense of what the text is saying. So without further ado, let's get into the Hebrew and see if it works. See if we can understand what this scripture is saying. We'll do this together. All right, so let's look at the Hebrew, and then we'll go over it all. And we'll take one word by word to break it down. So hopefully you have the patience and the endurance to go through this. And I feel that it will be very beneficial for everyone. But you be the judge of that. Now, first and foremost, before we get into this, all praise, honor, and glory goes to the Most High through his Son. And we call the Most High Elion, but some know his proper name to be Yahuwah, or either Yahawah, some dialects, and some use a dialect Yahweh. And through his Son, some use Yahawashi, some use Yahusha, and some use Yehoshua. So that's who we are talking about. Now, it would be very beneficial, as we spoke during the class, that everyone gets a working understanding of the Hebrew language. So the first step is learning the alphabet. So hopefully you've been working on that and you can recognize some of the letters and the sounds that go with them. So let's just read it first, how it reads in the actual Hebrew text. I have the top line being in black. That is in what we call the Aramaic block lettering. Some say that script is called the modern script, and that's the text that's on the top in black. And also in the blue, we have what is known as the Phoenician Paleo script. Okay, and that's what some brothers say, I only want to do Paleo, and here's the Paleo right here on this line. So in Hebrew, we read from right to left, top to bottom. So this line is the first line of that scripture, and then we'll go to the bottom line. So let's just sound it out in Hebrew, and I'll go a little slow so we make sure we get the phonetic value of the consonants that we're about to break down. So, and also I have down here for your assistance, the way it sounds if you were to sound it out in English. This is what this would sound like. This is the morphology, and this is the phonology, how it sounds. This is how it looks. All right. So let's just say the whole thing. We got Taikwayu, Kodesh, Shofar, Bak Kese, Layom, and Kagenu. Again, Taikwayu, Kodesh, Shofar, Bakese, Layom, Kagenu. All right, so let's look at the first letter, or the first word. And I'm going to do this raw. I'm not going to do any music with it. This is just for you all and for us to, since we talked about it. And I may later put music and put it on YouTube or on a social media outlet for others to benefit from it as well. But this is basically for you all. Now, the first word that we have what is here. Let's look at the letters. You should know them. This is the ta, and this is the kwa, ein, and also the wa. Okay? And so when you put all this together, you get the taikwayu. All right? Now, every Hebrew word has a root. Well, most Hebrew words, not all, have a root. And this root here is the ta, the kwa, and the ein that you see here. Now, what that verbal root means is to give a blow, a thrust, a clap, or a blast. Okay, that's the verbal root and what that means. All right, and this is actually a verb that we're looking at. And it has a suffix that is right here. That's very important. This is a suffix that lets you know the verbal stem of this word. And it's a suffix that means a second masculine plural. A second masculine plural suffix to this verb stem. All right? And what this actually means is a qual verb, imperative, second masculine plural. Is a third ein verb. All this may not make sense to you, but I'm saying it for those who are studying. And how we render this in English is simple. It means blow you, because we got and that you is a plural, so it's a group of people. We're saying blow you. All right. So that is this word. Let's see if there's any footnotes I want to add to this before we go on. It means, like, again, to give a blow, a blast from an instrument. All right. Usually a horn or a clarion. Okay. And we see in some of the texts, and we'll read these after, in Hosea and Isaiah, that talks about it. All right. So a lot of people, one thing about this verb, To blow or blast, that's usually with an instrument, as we said. But you can also do this by clapping your hands and by doing some other loud noise. It doesn't have to be from an instrument, but this particular one is directly dealing with the instrument, as we can tell by the third grouping. It's dealing with an instrument called the shofar. We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, so I'm gonna pause now, and then we'll get some scriptures, and then how this is also used so you get a better understanding of that word. Now for the precepts of the word taikwayu, which we found out means blow you. To get the proper precept, that's always rooted in Torah. And the root scripture in Torah is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 10 and verse 10, which reads, "And in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginning of your months, you shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offering, that they may be to you for a memorial before Elohimkim. I am Yahawah, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Elohimkim." Now, here are more precepts that when you examine these, you will get a very clear picture on what this is meaning by blow you and the occasions when you should blow. Hosea chapter 5, verse 8, Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 27, Isaiah 18, verses 2 and 3, Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 1, and Joel chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and also verse 15. Okay, let's keep it moving and go to the next word. The previous word we had was taikwayu, which we understood it to mean blow you, you being plural, kind of like y'all instead of you. The next word grouping, we have a bet, a ket, a delet, and a shin. Bet, ket, delet, and a shin. When it's said together, it is Qodash, Qodash. And this is a masculine noun, a noun that means a new moon or a new month. Okay? And we have a verbal root that is Qodash. Actually, it's pronounced as a verbal root, Kadash. And that verbal root means to renew or to repair. Let me do something here. Let me just circle the verbal roots as we go along so you can see what they are. And we know in taikwayu, the verbal root is here. And we'll put it in a circle here for both the modern Aramaic and the Paleo-Phoenician script. And that is taqwa. And now when we get to this one, we have the verbal root as such. This is a verbal root. It's 3 consonants, which we normally call a shoresh. Okay? And getting back to Qodash, the verbal root again is kadash, which means to renew or to repair. And this first character here is a prefix preposition, which is ba, which means in. And since it has a sound of a then this will be in the new moon. So we have blow you in the new moon. Let's now look at some precepts to Qodash. But before we go there, the new moon actually means, which is Qodash, it means a certain day that new moon appears. A time of the new moon as a festival, an observance of a new moon, something you have to observe. This is also in the construct chain, which we'll talk about when it goes to the next noun. Because when you have a noun next to a noun, that is a construct chain, meaning these two are associated with one another directly. But let's look at some precepts right now of Qodash. Now for the precepts for the word by Qodash. Again, this word has a Torah root in the book of Exodus. And again, by Qodash means in the new moon. And we will go to Exodus chapter 12 and verse 2 to get the root. And it reads, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Now you may see that and wonder, where's the word moon? Well, that word that is used for months is Qodash, which is synonymous with new moon. Now for additional precepts, line upon line, we have 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 5, 18, 24, 27, and 34. Isaiah 66 and 23. Hosea chapter 5, verse 7. And Ezekiel chapter 46, verses 1 and 6. Okay, moving to the next word grouping we have here. Let's look at the consonants. We have a shin, a wa, a pe, and a resh. Shin, wa, pe, and resh. And together, when sounded, it is shofar. Some people may say shofar, shofar, shofar. So we have to look at the root now, and we'll do like we did the others. And this one has also a 3 consonant root called the shoresh, but there's something interesting about it. Here it is here. Now you may say that's 4 letters, but what it does in the root verb, the wa is not there. So it's just the shin, the pe, and the resh, which is safa, safa, which that means beauty, to be beautiful actually, to shine, to be fair, to be comely is what that means. And so with the shofar being a horn for blowing, it is understood that this sound is a sound that is beautiful. Okay, so that's the shofar and the root. And we also had talked about the word before it, which was ba Qodash, being a construct, and this is an absolute, which means this is directly related in relationship to the new moon and the shofar being used for blowing. All right, so let's look at some precepts now. Now, looking at the Torah rooted precept for shofar, let's go to the book of Exodus, chapter 19 and verse 19, which reads, "And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spoke, and Ha Elohim answered him by a voice." Now in this verse, it's interesting to note that the word trumpet actually appears in Hebrew as shofar. The other precepts are Hosea 5 and verse 8, Leviticus chapter 25, 8 through 10, Psalms 98, verse 6, and Psalms 47, 1 through 5, and again, Joel chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and verse 15. Okay, let's move on to the next word grouping, and this will prove to be a very interesting one. And we have the bet, we have the calf, salmek, and the hay. The bet, the calf, the salmek, and the hay. And when it's pronounced together, it is bak keseh. Bak keseh. All right. Now, what this is a noun. It is a masculine noun, and it represents the full moon. But let's look at the root first of all, and we will circle it like we did the other one. And give me a moment. And we have this as being the verbal root. That is the verbal root. And that verbal root is a kasa. Kasa. And kasa means to cover. That's interesting. Or should we say to clothe, to spread over. It's to cover, and to cover or spread over like clothes. Okay, so we have also a prefix that is here, the same one that we had in Kodesh. We have the same prefix, so it's in, this one was in the new moon, the Kodesh, but this one is Kaseh. And Keseh has a different meaning, but you have the same prefix. So we know that this prefix represents in, just like this one was in the new moon, this one is talking about something else. Now this Keseh that's here, the noun, it means a full moon, a full moon. And in the King James Version, it has it an appointed time. But this is actually a full moon. And there's a lot to go over here, over this word that is going to reveal a lot. So we're going to spend a little time on it. But before we do, let me just bring out that this is only mentioned one other time in the scriptures. And that is in Proverbs 7:20. And the full moon is translated as an appointed time. But a full moon is opposite the new moon, okay? And it's a masculine noun. So let's look at the precepts and dig a little deeper into this word. It's very interesting. Now let's just take our time for a moment and focus on the Hebrew words, because this scripture alone has caused many people to be confused about what it says. The appointed time, the full moon, what does it all mean? Well, what it has caused differences in how we celebrate. How we celebrate the Sabbaths, how we celebrate the new months or the new moons, and also the high holy days. We are celebrating all of these at different times. And it's important to become unified, especially in this time of the year when the new year is approaching and Passover is approaching. I can't help from wondering if at the first Passover, if some would have put the blood upon their gatepost or doorpost on one day and the other one 15 days before that, and then another group 15 days after that. Would the angel of death had taken those that had it in error? Would they had been at the wrong place at the wrong time? And the ones who did it correctly would have been at the right place at the right time? So let's look at this. And we'll take a look at the King James Version first, since that is the most predominant English translation, and ask the question, why is in the time appointed placed there in the text instead of a full moon or a covered moon or even a dark moon. Why is that? Because the word for the time appointed is very clear in Hebrew. That word is moed, moed, and that's Hebrew word 4150, and that means it's a masculine noun meaning an appointed time, a place, an appointed place, an appointed meeting, and it has a verbal root of ya'ad, which is Hebrew word 3269, ya'ad, and that means to appoint or to assign or to designate or to gather. So why is that there when the actual word that's there is bakaseh, which means covered moon or full moon? Now, oftentimes there are errors when you translate the Hebrew script into another language like English. And we can see that there can be errors. But the word appointed time is not really an error, but it is not a sufficient word. It is not specific enough for what's really going on in the text. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you have jobs or occupations that are outside and not inside. Let's say like a farmer who plants gardens and harvests crops. And you also have a vine dresser and who handles grapes. And let's say you have a shepherd. Now, if you just render jobs on the outside, it's not specific if you are talking about a shepherd. The same as with this case. Appointed time can be used, but it's not specific enough for what's going on with the full moon. Now, looking at that root word kasa, which means to cover, you can see how different understandings and different translations have rendered this word. And we have seen how the appointed time is not there as moed. However, there is a specific covered moon, or should we say a full moon, that is an approved appointed moed, a time, a place, or a meeting. What is it, you may ask? What is that appointed day? Let's now find out what exactly is that solemn feast. Okay, now it's time for the last two words. And these are going to prove to really explain what is going on with all of this. Okay, because in the King James versions and most translations to English, it ends that Psalms 81:3 by saying our solemn feast is how it reads. So let's see what the Hebrew can reveal that the English translations has failed to reveal. And let's look first at the first word grouping, which we have a lamed, a yod, a wah, and a meme. A lamed, a yod, a wah, and a meme. And when you pronounce it together, it's layom, layom. And this first character here is a prefix, okay? That is a prefix that is a preposition representing for something or to something or towards something, or how we're going to use it, in regards to something, in regards to something. So that's laolam. And this here is the actual shoresh, but it has no root It does not have a verbal root, but I'll still circle the shoresh, which is a masculine noun, which is here. Here we go. We got the yod, the wa, and the meme, and that makes up the yom, which again is a masculine noun, and it represents daytime. Scratch that, not daytime, but day. Okay, in regard to day. In regard is lamed, today. Okay, so that's that word. Let's get to the most interesting word that we have, that is the last word grouping, and it is a ket, a gamel, a noon, and a wa. A ket, gamel, noon, and wa. And when it's pronounced together, it's kagenu. Kagenu. Kagenu is the right way to say it. Let's look at the root, which we have, which is here. Aha. Just right here is two letters. Two letters, the ka, the ket, that is, and the gamel. The ket and the gamel. And what this means, you also have a prefix, a suffix at the end. You have a suffix that is here, which is the noon and the wa. And let's hit the suffix first. What that means is first common plural. And it's usually translated hour, O-U-R, hour, first common plural. That's the suffix. And you have here is the gathering, is what this actually means, is a cog. Okay, it's a masculine noun. It means a feast, a pilgrim festival. Notice that, a pilgrim festival. And the root word is a verb, which you have the ket, the gamel, and another gamel, which would be kageg, 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 kageg. And that means to make or keep a pilgrimage. Notice the key word here is pilgrimage. All right, so that sums up all of the words, and now we're going to break it down so you can see why it is so interesting when we're talking about our, which is the first common plural, pilgrimage feast, our pilgrimage feast. Okay, and we will come back and see what it does. Now, I realize that many of you are very sharp and already know the 3 pilgrimage feasts that we are ordered to attend. So let's look at the root Torah scripture, Deuteronomy chapter 16 and verse 16. 3 times a year shall all thy males appear before Yahuwah, Yahweh, Yahawah, Elohimka, in the place where he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, and in the feast of weeks, and in the feast of tabernacles. And they shall not appear before Yahawah empty. And for other precepts, we have Exodus chapter 23, verses 14 through 17. Exodus chapter 10, verses 8 and 9. Isaiah chapter 30, verse 29. And Leviticus chapter 23, verses 15 through 17. So is Psalms 81:3 the scripture that causes many to believe that the new moon is the full moon? If not, what other scriptures are there that supports that a new moon is a full moon? I could not find them. But when we look at that scripture, is it saying this? As we read it as blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day, is that making one event? Is it saying that the new moon is the full moon? Or is it 2 separate events in that one scripture? We have arrived at a point where a question needs to be asked and an answer given. And the question is, if the full moon is believed and taught to be the new moon, and that means it's the first day of the new month, and since Passover is the 14th day of the first month, shouldn't the moon be full on the 14th day to match the Hebrew word for the full moon being on a pilgrimage feast as Passover is? And since the moon has been placed there by the Creator to be for signs and for seasons, let's just get a better understanding of the moon as it is used in the Hebrew text. Now let's look at another Hebrew word for a moon, and that word is Yareka. That is a Yod, Resh, and a Ket. And this Yareka is the actual luminary that sits in the Shemayim, or in the firmament. And by divine ordinances, the luminary releases phases of light each day or each night where it is viewed differently. It starts off with a slither of light and it waxes until the moon is completely covered with light, and then it wanes, which is it diminishes in light until it becomes no light at all in the Shemayim. This again is called Yareka. And now let's pay very close attention to the word Qodash, which is the new moon. And it is a single moon phase that starts day one of the new month when observed. Now we must see the importance of the Hebrew verbal roots. The verbal root is Qodash, which means to renew. This is the only moon phase that renews light and can therefore be called a new moon. The full moon does not qualify for a renewal. Why? Because there is light prior to the full moon and there is light after the full moon. But before the full moon, it is still in the last phase of waxing. So therefore, it is not renewed. The renewal comes when the light is covered with darkness and not visible light at all. Then the next phase of light qualifies completely, without a shadow of doubt, that it is a renewed or new moon or new month. Now to pay close attention to the full moon, which is called Kaseh. And it is a single moon phase on the 14th or the 15th of each month when the face of the moon is completely covered with light. And it rules the darkness from the setting of the sun until the sun rises the next day. And again, the root word is kasah, which means to cover. And this is covering the entire face of the moon. It is adequate, but more importantly, it is tied to the pilgrimage feast in Psalms 81:3. Now let's wind this down before we close so we can really see in the scriptures that this is talking about Passover and the New Year and the trumpets memorial as well as the Feast of Tabernacles. So let's go to Psalms 81 and look at verses 1 and 2. And we will see that it says, "Sing aloud unto the Most High, our strength. Make a joyful noise unto the Elohim of Jacob. Take a psalm and bring hither the timbrel. the pleasant harp with the psaltery. That, my friends, is talking about a party, a joyful party that is occurring in the new month of Abib. This is our New Year celebration because it commemorates not only the springtime, but our start of deliverance from bondage in Egypt. Now that we have seen how the new moon is tied to the new year, directly to the month of Abib, which is the start of the spring, and let's look now at the verses that ties the full moon to the solemn feast of pilgrimage called Passover in verses 4 and verses 5. Verse 4 reads, "For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the Elohim of Jacob, that he ordained Joseph for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not." And in verse 6, "I removed his shoulder from the burden." That's the burden of slavery. "His hands were delivered from the pots." Was not that deliverance Passover, the very first Passover? And in closing, I would like to now give you the Hebrew language student translation, and it will go like this. "Blow you in the new moon, the shofar, in the full moon, in regards to the day of our pilgrim feast." And I would like to say shalom, peace be to you all.
This is the word of the Lord of hosts. I took you from the pastures and from following the sheep to be prince over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone and have destroyed all the enemies in your path. I will make you a great name among the great ones of the earth. I will assign a place for my people in Israel. There I will plant them, and they shall dwell in their own land.